Evening, everyone. This is the third day of the regenBC conference. Tonight, our focus is on technology. We hope that you will enjoy this event from wherever you are. If you have joined us for one or both of our other sessions, welcome back. If this is your first session, welcome. I really hope that you enjoy the content tonight. My name is Glenn Lougheed, and I'm your host for tonight. It is a pleasure to be with you on this, let's just call it a gloomy evening. I would like to start by acknowledging that we are grateful to be virtually gathering on Indigenous land, regardless of where you are and where you're joining us from. Me personally, I'm located on the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, represented by the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam First Nations. They've been custodians of this land for thousands of years. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Before we dive into our agenda, I wanted to talk about what is exciting me about this evening. If you look at my bio, you'll see that I am a high-tech guy and a data nerd. But what is not there is that I also come from a long line of turkey farmers. And what excites me about ag tech is the opportunity that data can provide, right? For decades, farmers have perfected their methods by observing and experimenting over the course of multiple cycles, over the course of multiple years. Right? And they've combined this with intuition in to be very successful. But now with new opportunities to collect reams and reams of granular data every day to augment this intuition, it's proving to be game changing. So think about the satellite imaging or ground sensors or weather data. We're seeing the ability to leverage all of that with their intuition, understanding their land to improve yields, to find efficiencies, and to manage climate impacts. A great example of this here in BC is Verdi. They are essentially bringing precision indoor irrigation to the outdoors. They're using satellite data and machine learning to focus on the water resources and being able to focus them in areas that are of the most need. Right? And they've had amazing results by being able to reduce the amount of water that's used, but at the same time being able to increase yield. And I think what's also exciting about them is that they're a BC company, but they're starting to get recognized outside of British Columbia. They were just recently in the San Francisco TechCrunch Disrupt conference. So we're starting to see the homegrown innovations being able to expand beyond it. But what I really believe that we're seeing the beginning of, and what the next leap forward is the ability to share this data with other farmers, with climate scientists, agricultural scientists, and business partners, right? So now just think about this data being able to go downstream into the supply chain. It could generate better pricing models for our farmers. It gives the retailers predictability, and it also gives the customers a story about where the food comes from, how it's grown, how it's traded. Ultimately, this generates greater profit for the farmer, but it also helps stabilize our fragile supply chains, right? And if there's anything that we've learned over the last 20 months is that our supply chains need that kind of help. In BC, we have a company called This Fish. They are working in this area. They are working on traceability. So they are tracking the journey of harvested fish from the ocean to your plate. Essentially, they're digitizing the workflow and streamlining it along that whole process, which is interesting because it creates sort of transparency and trust in the flow of goods to your table, which is, I think, essential for us moving forward. Now, the work of both these companies is helping reverse environmental degradation in different ways. And there's a ton of companies here in BC that are doing the same. And you're going to hear about a few of them tonight, but I urge you, everyone here tonight, to explore our ag tech sector and see the great things that are happening here. So now let's get to our agenda. So first, I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the evening. It's the Honorable Lana Popham, our Minister of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. I've just started to get to know our minister, but I have to say that I'm absolutely amazed by her passion for this sector. She's a true champion as she spearheaded things like Grow BC, Feed BC, and the Buy BC initiatives. And in fact, she's also responsible for getting the BC Food Hub Network over the line. But you kind of say, well, hey, that's her job. But it is. But I think when we start to look deeper, we understand where her passion for this sector comes from. So before entering politics, and this is a long list, so I apologize, I'm going to go through it. She co-founded and operated the first certified organic vineyard on Vancouver Island. She was the president of the Vancouver Island Grape Growers Association. She was the chair of the certification committee for the Island Organic Producers Association. She was also a member of the the Investment Agriculture Board and the Peninsula Agricultural Commission. So we can see that this passion for this sector is very long-term. And I really believe that the Premier made the right choice in choosing her to represent this sector and be the advocate. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our Minister, Lana Popple.
Wow, thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you for that introduction. Glenn is an amazing guy who has taken me under his wing and is guiding me through agritech in BC, and I appreciate his time so much. And Glenn, thanks for being part of this evening. It means a lot to me. I want to welcome everybody to this virtual space tonight with gratitude and thanks to the Wasanic peoples on whose traditional territory I reside, which is on the Saanich Peninsula on Vancouver Island in Cordova Bay. I want to acknowledge the contributions of First Nations people through the conference, the powerful opening acknowledgement by Chief Patrick Michelle of the Kanakabar Indian Band. I'm humbled that he could be with us over this 3 days as his family is facing a catastrophe, his community is facing a catastrophe from the wildfires this summer. It speaks to his commitment to sustainable agriculture and to a sustainable future that he envisions. I also want to acknowledge that tomorrow is the National Day for Reconciliation. This is a time for us non-Indigenous people to learn and reflect about our past in Canada and to recommit to reconciliation. Supporting sustainable food security in this part of the world is part of reconciliation. It's an obligation on all of us. We have much to learn from Indigenous people and their food producing practices that kept this part of the world healthy and bountiful for many thousands of years. Scrolling through the participants, I know that there are many farmers here tonight, people with tremendous knowledge and lived experience when it comes to regenerative agriculture and technology. Thank you for walking the talk. I know it's really hard work and it's much appreciated. You know what it means to grow food, to raise animals, to feed others, and really to create food security and a food system. The work will only endure if it's propelled by people like you, like us here tonight. And the tables are brought together under an umbrella that includes everyone, where barriers are brought down and hands are reached out to others to explore these new ideas without being afraid. Folks who've already embraced sustainable, ecological, organic, regenerative farming principles, there are many here tonight, they've all connected with core principles that Dr. Deborah Henderson of KPU reminded us of on day one. You figured much of this out a long time ago. You've had the grit and the talent to make a go of it as a farmer. And for that, I thank you as a past farmer. And I also want to welcome all of our non-farmers. When the idea of this conference was first raised, I was told that the topic was an odd fit of old and new, and it would be of interest to just a handful of folks. But in fact, over 500 people have registered for this conference and hundreds are participating each evening. So not just farmers know what regen is. It's farmers who want to know more about it. It's agritech businesses, it's scientists, it's food policy folks, and it's academics. Everybody is keen on what we're doing. The surge of interest speaks to the moment we're in, I believe. It shows the depth of our shared enthusiasm that there is a positive way forward. We want to know what that is. That farming can and should be part of our larger conviction to keep science and sustainability together. Thank you for giving up your precious time to learn with us and to be with us this evening. When we look at the future of agriculture and food systems in BC, we know that we need to approach the challenge ahead with determination and to make sure our approach is grounded in facts and the reality of what's on the ground and what's in the ground. There are significant changes, challenges, and disruptions ahead. We all got a glimpse of that this summer. That's why we began this conference with one of Canada's foremost climate change scientists, Dr. Andrew Weaver, on our first evening. He laid bare the challenge before us, sharing his expert opinion that our best case scenario for global warming was not 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's not the 2 degrees, which itself is full of many scary scenarios. The best case, he said, was 3 degrees of warming, and that assumes we change our ways at a global scale. He noted how hard it is for politicians to drive change because we need to change things now, but the benefits won't be felt for at least 30 years out. People expect politicians to deliver change immediately, but that is not how climate change works. That is why I appreciate you being here with us tonight. You give me the strength as a politician and the momentum to do the work that I need to do to affect long-term systemic change that we need, a paradigm shift. In that vein, I also want to say that I very much appreciate my colleague, Minister George Heyman, who's agreed to close this conference tonight. He's the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, and he knows the challenges before us, and he knows that we need to start doing more. And he's supportive of what we're doing here tonight and what we're trying to accomplish. How can the sector reduce its emissions? How can it sequester carbon? How can it adapt to a hotter climate or water shortages and extreme weather events? How can we produce more food with less pollution? How can we support farmers to increase profitability? This is what we're talking about tonight and throughout this conference. I believe the BC government is on the right path with Regen as we intensify our efforts to support farming that's sustainable. I expect my ministry to be the wind at the back of those who are growing food and caring for the earth. Caring for the earth is at the heart of regenerative farming. A handful of earth, of soil, is full of trillions of living microorganisms. If we generate this life, we're on the right path, and agritech can help us do that. Agritech is simply tech for agriculture. It's not something to be afraid of. It's true that things like green tech and clean tech, agritech is a broad term, and it means many different things, even to the same people using those terms. But agritech isn't new. Almost all farmers already use one of the most advanced pieces of technology that humanity has ever developed, the smartphone. And we all know it's just a pocket-sized phone, yet it provides access to the World Wide Web, the world's information, as well as incredible software that farmers generations ago didn't even imagine possible. I want to see more agritech that empowers farmers using regenerative practices, the kind that helps make their farms more profitable, the kind that creates jobs, and that provides food security and sustainability. It's not that complicated, and yet it is complicated. The core idea propelling regenBC is that government can help farmers who are using regenerative practices access the latest and best in proven technology. Dairy farmer Mickey Allard said it so well in her video, and she's walking the talk. If you haven't seen her video, or if you've watched it a dozen times like I have, please check it out because it's quite amazing. A young woman dairy farmer who is committed to being successful, of course, as a dairy farmer, but also making sure that her dairy farm is connected to the earth. I've shared this video on my social media if you want to check it out there. The past few decades have brought remarkable advances in computing power, software, and hardware, especially when it comes to robotics, to cameras and sensors. This agritech creates new opportunities for our food system. Gabe Brown, who spoke yesterday, didn't mention this in his presentation, but he began as a conventional farmer and for many years really struggled to make a go of it. He came to regenerative agriculture with all the knowledge of a conventional farmer, and with farmland degraded by decades of overtilling and overusing chemical pesticides and fertilizers. His success is really inspiring, as is the success of so many BC farmers we've featured during this conference. Farmers like Tristan Banwell and Heather Stretch. Thank you both for being a part of it. I wanted to emphasize something that Tristan said last night because I think it's really important. He said farmers have enough risk already. Farming is inherently risky and will only become more uncertain with this extreme weather events that we're seeing. They don't need more risk. They need agritech that is proven, that demonstrates real world benefits right now. And that's what we're going to be advancing. There are agritech solutions to address a range of challenges in our sector for small operators and for large operators. We have world-class agritech being developed right here in our own province. There are so many companies I could mention, and a number of them have been featured during this conference, but I wanted to acknowledge Karin Manhas, the CEO of Terramera specifically, because we have the individuals from Terramera joining us on each of our deep dives tonight. Chief Scientific Officer, the inspiring Annette Rozek, is speaking later tonight, as well as Elgin Donnelly, the Senior Advisor of Carbon Markets. Terramera's mandate is for agritech to specifically work with regenerative agriculture. It's very interesting, and I'm very excited about what they're doing. I also wanted to emphasize that at one point, the one point that Karin made last night when he was speaking, Karin said that a key advantage we have in this province is our agricultural land reserve, land that was protected for agriculture over 40 years ago. Now it's more important than ever, and we know that. That was a very brave political decision that wouldn't really see payoff until after the decision, years after the decision was made, and long after that provincial government was gone. But that's the type of decision that we need to be making now that affects our future. And that brings me to acknowledging and thanking the chair of the Agricultural Land Commission, Jennifer Dyson. Chair Dyson has done so much and shown such leadership in this conference. And as a farmer herself, I know that she's committed. So what's next? The conference is just a beginning of what we want to accomplish here. It's not an ending tonight. The key outcome of this conference will be for the a formation of an advisory committee from among the participants. The wisdom of this virtual room is the wisdom I need to perform the work that's ongoing from this point on. Another outcome is that I want to invite all of you who are watching to be part of the Regenerative Agriculture and Agritech Network. I want you to stay involved because we need your input, and we need to be able to make contact with you when change is coming. If you want to stay involved, just add yourself to our emailing list at ran@gov.bc.ca so we can stay in touch. And finally, I just want to commit to you that all my work will be grounded in key messages we've heard over the past 3 days. The goals of RAN are to strengthen the provincial food system, to respond to climate change and improve environmental sustainability, to increase farm profitability and employment opportunities. Together, we can combine regenerative agriculture and agritech to help farmers, food security, and our environment here in BC. It's a simple idea, but it's an idea whose time has come, and I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to hear how my friend and bee lover, Jeff Lee, puts these ideas together. So without further ado, I'll turn the conference back over to Glenn. Thank you again for being here and for all you do. This conference is personally really important to me. And because you're here spending this time with us, I know it's important to you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Popham. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker tonight, Jeff Lee. Jeff and his wife, Amanda, own Honeybee Zen apiaries and the Swan Valley Honey in Creston. They are the largest retail producer of local honey in the Kootenays. Honeybee Zen uses a number of adaptive technologies and practices to meet the challenges of climate change, regenerative agriculture, disease prevention, and production. He is definitely a guiding light in these areas. So please welcome Jeff Lee.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Glenn, for that introduction. I'd like to acknowledge that I live on, and I am speaking tonight from the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa in the Creston Valley. I'd like to thank Lana for her considerable support of the beekeeping industry. She is, I think, in all the years that I was a reporter, I never saw an agriculture minister who paid that kind of attention. And it is a refreshing thing for us to see in this industry. So thank you. I'm reading from a script because I'm not really good at ad-libbing and I always go over. So you'll have to bear with me as I do this. Now you may ask what a honey business has to do with regenerative agriculture or agritechnology. And on cue, there you go. I'm going to try and answer that in the next 15 minutes and show how bee operations are integral to increasing biodiversity, one of the pillars of regenerative agriculture. But first, I want to tell you a little story that may help set the stage. In early July this year, the staff of a well-meaning orchardist in the Creston Valley laid down the pesticide malathion on a sunny day on a farm next to the Kootenay River. He was trying to control mosquitoes that might bother his pickers, but he failed to think about his neighbors. Malathion is incredibly toxic to different flying insects, including bees, as well as some amphibious species. It is the most common organophosphate pesticide in use in Canada, and it is a harsh chemical. Unfortunately, for the 5 commercial beekeepers with bees within a couple of kilometers of his farm, the spray decimated hundreds of hives and robbed them of foragers, essentially crippling those colonies for the rest of the season. It also had a dramatic effect on the wild pollinators and the foragers in the area. Essentially, anything flying died. I think this incident, which is now under investigation by the Federal Pest Management Regulatory Agency, adequately illustrates both the opportunities for regenerative agriculture and the challenges that we face as farmers and as stewards of the land. As commercial beekeepers who are part of Canada's $2.8 billion honey and pollination industry, we occupy a unique position in the agricultural world. We don't own the land upon which we produce our product or provide pollination. We depend upon farmers and landowners for the forage our bees visit. Our investments are small by comparison to that of the large farms and agro-industries that produce many of our food staples. Consequently, we are an almost forgotten part of the agriculture web, and to some, our craft is regarded as romantically quaint, something that their grandfathers used to do. We are, at best, an inconsequential industry to some, and at worst, a pain to farmers whose chemical or factory-level practices come in conflict with us. And yet, we are the keepers of a sentinel species so key to agriculture, the environment, and indeed business. BC's blueberry, cranberry, cherry, apple, and vegetable farmers depend upon pollination from both our honeybees and many of the 450 different species of wild pollinators that live here. Without pollination, these agricultural commodities cannot reach their full potential. You're all probably familiar with the statistic that about 1/3 of our food is derived from pollination. But if we are considered quaint by some, we face a more perilous problem. We are at the bottom of the decision-making matrix that farmers must use when protecting their crops and their investments. I want to explain to you why I say that. The rental of a pollination hive, we rent our hives for about $120. The cost of the bees and the equipment is about $500 a hive. We expect that hive to also produce spin-off colonies in a summer honey worth perhaps $1,000. So when a farmer accidentally sprays my bees at the beginning of the season, the damage can be significant. It is a major reason why commercial beekeepers now choose, many of them now choose not to pollinate crops. It's safer for our bees, but it's not good for the farmers who need us. And the blueberry industry is a really good example of that. They have a deficit in BC of more than 40,000 colonies, and the problem is getting worse. They can't get enough bees to pollinate their crops. Beekeepers' hives get poisoned not out of malicious intent or reasons for that. It's because of ignorance. It's because of the pressures that farmers face to produce beautiful looking, blemish-free fruit and vegetables. What is $120 opposed to the thousands of dollars lost on crops that are infected with a fungus or with fruit-eating pests? But to beekeepers, that $120 is nothing compared to the specter of dead or damaged colonies, lost honey, and lost growth. So the concept of regenerative agriculture and its marriage to agritechnology are really important to us as beekeepers. You know, we're the beneficiaries in terms of better, healthier forage on lands that are farmed by enlightened farmers. Our honey yields improve, our bees are healthier, our business risk is less volatile. But it's also a two-way street. Farmers who use regenerative practices and technology reduce or eliminate inputs such as chemicals. They also see increased productivity from the honeybees and wild pollinators that visit or live on their land. Bees, both domestic and wild, figure strongly into the concept of regenerative agriculture. A number of years ago, Simon Fraser University professor Elizabeth Ellie proved that if blueberry growers, for example, were to leave verges on the side of their fields in which wild bees can live, their berry yields would go up. If they leave pollen-producing dandelions in between the rows rather than poison them with glyphosate, yields would go up because the colonies can produce larvae which sustain the population and improve pollination. In a 2015 study, Dr. Ellie and her colleagues pointed out that wild bees alone add on average $3,000 per hectare to a farmer's yield. That's a strong economic reason for reducing pesticide use. Even before Dr. L's research, eminent UBC bee researcher Mark Winston found that if canola farmers left land uncultivated within 750 meters of field edges, they had better yield and profitability than if they plowed the entire field. And these instances don't take into account the regenerative soil practices that we now understand are so beneficial to us. Think about the outcome then in terms of productivity and biodiversity. Dr. Winston also pointed out in his Governor General Award-winning book, Bee Time, that honeybees are the canary in nature's coal mine. The negative effects of monoculture farming, the synergistic effects of combined pesticides are a 1-2 punch on pollinators. Our honeybees, therefore, are then the very visible evidence of what happens when poor farming practices hurt nature. For beekeepers, our own agritechnology and regenerative practices are then also important. You know, beekeeping is a very old practice. In many ways, the mechanics haven't significantly changed from 1850s when Reverend Langstroth invented a hive with removable frames. We still use that basic white box today for reasons of efficiency, honey production, and disease inspection. I've got a note saying all right, thank you. In many ways, our industry looks nothing like what Langstroth envisioned. We now face monumental obstacles in keeping our bees alive. The worldwide spread of beekeeping has also allowed regional diseases and pests to jump species and has allowed for the proliferation of hive-killing mites. You know, the next slide, please. Beekeepers all over the world now have to contend with this pest, the Varroa mite. It's an Asiatic pest that in Canada's case arrived on our doorstep in 1987. It vectors viruses, and it is one of the underlying causes of colony collapse disorder. Another disease, Nosema apis, it's a protozoan disease that was once the scourge of North American beekeepers has now been replaced by Nosema ceranae, another Asian bee jumper that, like Nosema apis, it is like Nosema apis, but it is on steroids. We have no significant treatment for this disease, and it has now overtaken Nosema apis. Sorry. All of this helps to explain why Canada's overwintering bee mortality averages 30% per year. And in some provinces like Alberta last year, it was 40%. Now, if dairy farmers and cattle ranchers and hog farmers had annual livestock losses like that, well, they'd quickly go into bankruptcy. If that was not enough, climate change is now also delivering a body blow to farmers and beekeepers alike. As summers dry out and winters get shorter, farmers will witness changes in forage cycles. Beekeepers are already seeing this. You know, this summer's heat dome, for example, was a good example of what happened to us. Many of our beekeepers in BC went on to record very low honey yields. Others, like ourselves here in the Creston Valley, tangentially benefited from the dry summer when the valley's alfalfa hay farmers, who nominally cut at 10% bloom, delayed their second cut because the plants slowed growth and there was not enough moisture. It meant that their plants went to bloom. It meant that we got honey, but on the other hand, they suffered. So part of the problem here also, I think, is that farms overuse the land and they don't engage in regenerative processes, and they're going to face a reckoning as their production goes down and their costs go up. You know, in the last decade or more, our industry has embraced ag tech and regen concepts in the hope of keeping our bees alive, even if we are still using that box that Langstroth first patented in 1852. The use of Bluetooth technology, cellular technology, has allowed us to monitor individual hives. In our own operation, we use a device out of the United States called Broodminder, and we put it in our sentinel hives, and it warns us when we have problems or when we have unexpected changes. We have a weigh scale under some of our hives, and that alerts us to when there's a honey flow on, or so we can manage whether or not we need to add more boxes. We also have temperature sensors that indicate when there's a brood problem, such as a missing queen, or we have something that's gone sideways. And so we allow these devices to assist us. These electronic eyes then augment ours when we are not in those yards. Amanda and I are also part of a group of BC beekeepers that are carrying out multi-year studies of how to use Bluetooth technology to better manage our bees. We were also recently licensed as a federal food processor, and as a result, we are engaging in full-scale traceability. We know where our honey is coming from. We know where we process it or when we process it. We know who it goes to. We know how to track it back if there's a problem with it. So, you know, we fully believe that at the very granular level that data is important to our business. You know, beekeepers also have an access to a secret weapon. Port Coquitlam is the home of Sterigenics. Now, it's formerly known as Iotron Industries, and some of you may actually use their services. The company uses high output electricity to sterilize a vast array of products, from surgical knees and hips and medical devices to animal feeds. But it also has a dramatic effect on cleaning diseased honeycomb frames. When one of my hive dies, I don't know why. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with it. So putting fresh bees into a dead hive is not really a good idea, is it? So I and hundreds of other beekeepers in British Columbia and Alberta ship our winter kill hives to Sterigenics for irradiation. What we get back is boxes that are free of pathogens and background noise that could slow our bees down. Research done a number of years ago by the BC Apiculture Division has shown that bees placed on irradiated comb grow faster and more healthily. They just don't have to deal with what was left there. This service, I have to tell you, is not easily available in other parts of Canada and the United States. Another project that we're involved in is looking at the use of mycological extracts to reduce hive-killing viruses. Now, those Varroa mites vector those viruses into our hives, and as a result, if the Varroa wasn't bad enough, the viruses do a fine job of killing our hives. So in 2015, Paul Stamets, who I like to describe him as the wonder boy of the mushroom world, and Stephen Shepard of the University of Washington showed in cage trials that honeybees, when fed an extract of several species of mushrooms, had lower loads of certain Varroa vectored viruses. Over the last 2 years, okay, I am assuming that everybody can hear me now.
Hi, everyone. So Jeff's having a few technical issues, but we'll get him back. So in the meantime, I'd like to introduce a video from a ag tech company here in, actually in the Lower Mainland. And they're making some really interesting, innovative products that support regenerative agriculture. So please enjoy this video.
We're really driven by this idea that we're developing solutions that help mitigate climate impact and the impact on food security and nutrition. So the first product that we developed over the last few years is a new type of micronutrient fertilizer. What is unique about the product is we're taking a byproduct stream from the food processing industry and we're able to upcycle it in a high-value fertilizer that performs better than existing technologies that are on the market. We have developed a product that has the properties of a slow-release fertilizer. It releases these nutrients over a prolonged period of time. And so the first time we were able to produce product, it took us 20 tons of water to produce 1 ton of product.
So what we had to do was find a way to decrease the amount of water input so that we wouldn't have to treat that. So our super smart team at Simon Fraser University came up with a way to do an entirely waterless method of manufacturing.
I can say I love that agriculture is connected to the future science. It never stops and it supports food security.
Eventually, we were able to optimize the process in such a way that we don't need any water anymore. This process doesn't produce waste.
The way that our nutrients are released is they are released by the plants and the microbiome themselves when they need it.
It's specifically important if you consider that this has been taken after a severe drought. The product is carbon neutral. It improves soil health. It doesn't leach or have any form of pollution.
You're putting cellulose back in the soil, so you're sequestering carbon, you're feeding the microbiome, and you're preparing that soil for a better season next year.
We also see significant increases of uptake of those nutrients in the plant. So that means that crops grown with our products are healthier to consume. An increased level of nutrients also results in better taste and aroma.
What I've found is with the growers themselves is they're very consistent. They're interested in things that work better. And you have to understand from a grower's perspective, I mean, they have a business, they have a family, they need to grow those things. I think if you don't get out and talk to farmers, it's something I don't know that you really understand the struggle, the day-to-day hard work that it is to be a farmer. We can grow more food using the same amount of arable land and using the same equipment that we use now. It's very important for British Columbia in particular because we have a very small amount of agricultural land. And we need to produce the highest value products that we can and sequester carbon in our province.
So we've got our keynote back. Hopefully he's fixed his technical issues. So let me throw it back to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I have to tell you, when we left Vancouver for Creston, we were the beneficiaries of some terrific internet services in the Lower Mainland. And up here, yeah, that's one of our problems. So I do apologize. And you know what? After 40 years as a journalist, I was always on the other side asking questions. It is very difficult to be on this side. And so I apologize if I'm coming across as disjointed. So I want to just go back to what I was saying about Paul Stamets. He did some fantastic research that showed a link between the potential for mycological extracts or mushroom extracts to actually help reduce viruses in bees. And so we took that information and he assisted us, and we went ahead with some field level assessments, trying to understand how that might affect us at a commercial level. That research has been funded in part through the provincial government and also through the National Bee Diagnostic Center in Beaver Lodge, Alberta. So we're still doing work on it. It's got a long ways to go yet, but it's something that we're interested in. We're not just going to put our bees out there and want to collect honey. We want to make sure that we find out how to help them stay alive. Our company also benefits from the rotational practices of the Valley's hay and crop producers. When a field is taken out of production, we work with them to find a replacement location for our bees. When a new alfalfa field is planted, we know we have 3 to 5 years of growing honey production there. So we do try working very closely with the farmers to understand how they use the land and how we might benefit from their practices. One of those, a really good example of that is the organic certified Kootenay Meadows Dairy. They convinced the local road maintenance crews to move to mechanical cutting of roadside vegetation around their fields rather than using pesticides and sprays. We locate our bees on and around their land, and we're the beneficiaries of others who also practice that kind of regenerative agriculture. Now, one of the simplest regenerative practices that beekeepers themselves do is what we term integrated pest management. Some of our most effective mite controls are chemicals, which places us in the same box as other farmers as we try and figure out how not to put chemicals into our hives. We're essentially trying to kill a tiny bug on a slightly larger bug. So, using these chemicals, we can easily saturate our wax comb with harmful products that can do generational damage to our bees, even at a sublethal level. Our honey exports can be denied entry to countries if they exceed, if our honey exceeds set limits for chemical residues. And as a matter of fact, there's a new limit that's coming out for glyphosate in Japan that may very well put a big dent in Canadian honey exports. So we face the same practices, we face the same pressures as other farmers to practice regenerative farming. Not knowing when or why a hive needs to be treated is, to me, silly. So we tend to engage in what we call regular low impact testing. Every month, and the picture on the screen here is a good example, we test our mite loads by sampling our bees to determine what's the level of mites that we have in our hives. And when they reach a critical level where it can actually damage, then we will treat. If we don't find those mites, then we leave them alone and let them try and live as naturally as possible. We've also largely switched to organic compounds. If our colonies need treatment, they get it, but we don't use a hammer to kill a mite when a lighter touch is all that is needed. One positive outcome is the reduction of chemical miticides. And another is that we have a much higher confidence that more of our hives will survive through 6 months of winter. I'm on the board of the BC Honey Producers Association. This year, we are finally creating a provincial technology transfer program that will aid BC's several thousand beekeepers in developing consistent, low-impact pest management practices. We are the last province in Canada to stand up a tech program, and our aim is to lower winter mortality, increase production, reduce chemical treatments, and strengthen our export capability of honey and bee livestock. And I have to tell you, obviously, that credit goes to this government and to Agriculture Minister Lana Popham for their considerable support. Now, I want to circle back to that terrible pesticide incident this summer. You know, at first I was angry that my bees had been killed and my honey production for those hives had evaporated. And it was, I can't tell you how heart-wrenching it was to see those bees writhing in their deaths, even as they were on the ground. It was a senseless error on the part of the farmer. Ironically, many of the hives of the other beekeepers that he affected were the very ones that had just pollinated his cherry trees. Unfortunately, this isn't the first pesticide incident that Amanda and I have experienced, and I suspect that it won't be the last. But what this error shows us is the value of regenerative agriculture. The more we practice it, the less reason we have to use pesticides that can wipe out whole populations of non-target insects and continue to poison the land. Perhaps this now answers that question that I posed to you at the start of my talk about what beekeeping has to do with regen and ag tech. The more we look at land naturally, the more that we look after land naturally, the healthier the land and ourselves and our animals will be. The greater the biodiversity, the richer our lives will be. It may sound trite, but if we look after the soil and the bees and the plants, they will look after us. I want to thank the minister for inviting me to share this time with you. She is welcome to come beekeeping with us at any time, but she may want to ditch those yellow pumps that you see in that photograph. Thank you very much. And I do apologize for the technical issues.
Highlights thanks, Jeff. It just actually highlights how important the work that Minister Callon is doing to bring high-speed internet to some of those more rural communities in our province.
Yes.
So I'd like to take us into our breakout rooms because now it's time to do our deep dives. I'll be moderating the Data and Innovation panel, but I'd also like to introduce the moderator for our carbon sequestration panel. Michelle Koski is the executive director with the Investment Agriculture Foundation, an industry-led not-for-profit that specializes in the development and delivery of government-funded programs targeted towards ag food, ag environment, ag tech sectors here in BC. And prior to joining the IAF, Michelle served as the regional and deputy director for agriculture and Ag Foods Canada. So we'll break into our rooms.